Hey everybody, I'm really excited actually to see how many people are here at 5:40 on the third day of a conference in Vegas. I'm really flattered. I appreciate your attendance. We're gonna do this quickly. We're gonna do a talk, we're gonna do a demo, and I'm gonna get you out of here in time for happy hour. Yes. So Spring Cloud Services in your pocket. I have to start this whole thing with an admission. I mean this guy's pockets. But the thing is, that's impressive like unto itself. I've been working on this for a year, and the idea that you could fit it in any jeans, even 90s jeans, is pretty remarkable for Cloud Foundry. So we're gonna be talking about a product that you can use on a MacBook Air, if you should so desire, with down to 8 gigabytes of RAM, should you so desire. But to kick that off, we need to ask the question, why do we need a PCF development environment? Anytime you're starting work on a project, you need to ask that. You can't just do it because it's cool or because you think it's neat. But we kept hearing feedback on this. And the feedback sounded a lot like complaints. Turns out it works on my machine is not an acceptable excuse. I don't think that's been an acceptable excuse for like a really long time, but it's one of the reasons that you need dev prod parity. I don't want to rely on other people to test my changes on CF. When it works locally, I need to be sure it will work in prod. If it's broken on the cloud, I need to be able to reproduce the problem locally. And last but not least, I don't want to bosh. So I've actually given a number of talks on this topic, and I only just noticed that out of those 5 statements, they all relate to working on 12-factor apps, and they all relate to the same rule, which is dev prod parity. The first 4 have to do with realizing you need it, and the 5th one has to do with that being really hard and not wanting to do it. Which I also want to say, Bosh is amazing. It's a powerful tool that's incredibly difficult to learn. You start ramping up, and then eventually you are a wizard with powers beyond any other tool. But not every developer needs those powers or wants those powers to be able to test things locally on their machine. So that's okay. I love Bosh. It's no hatred on Bosh, but not wanting to do it is fine. So we end up with PCF Dev. It's a small footprint distribution of Pivotal Cloud Foundry. It's intended to be run on your local developer machine. That can be a workstation, that can be a laptop, that can be a laptop in a train without connection to the internet. We really focused on the things that prior versions of local development environments fell short on, which was size and simplicity. That's what people wanted. Like, they need to be able to have something that doesn't take up an immense amount of disk space and RAM, and they need something that is not going to be even a percentage of as difficult to set up as Cloud Foundry. It really needs to be just, let me test this, let me debug this. And I really like this diagram they gave us. I don't think it actually explains anything technical. If you're not already familiar with Cloud Foundry, this isn't going to make a huge amount of metaphorical sense to you, but it's very pretty, and I appreciate it. It lists off the things that you do get with PCF Dev, and it makes it somewhat clear what you don't, which is the purple layer below actual PCF, which is the Bosh layer. You don't get that. You don't get Ops Manager. You do get Apps Manager. You do get services. You do get Diego. And you do get, at any given point, the latest and greatest version of PCF Dev. PCF, because it is kept up to date. I'm going to be showing you in a second how we can scale and push on a local environment. I've brought this up. Just wanted to check to make sure that it came up, and yes, it did. Great, so specs. We have disk space. Pretty impressive, only requires 20 gigabytes image, 5 gigabytes download. Time to boot is generally under 7 minutes. I think the time that you just saw on my screen was a couple seconds more than that, but I've seen it load in as few as 3. That's really exciting, because even while building this, We had like 20 minutes as one of our more impressive times at some point. So a lot of work has been put into getting this down as low as possible. You can run with as little as 3 gigabytes of RAM, and if you're running with Spring Cloud Services, you can run with as little as 6. So we're still talking Mac Air size. This makes devs happy in a variety of ways. It works with the CF CLI. Some of you, depending on how long you've been working with Cloud Foundry, might be familiar with some of the prior attempts at local environments. Having a separate CLI did not help with the confusion. So this works with CF. It runs on your workstation. We've had Docker support since the beginning. It comes standard with Redis, RabbitMQ, and MySQL, or you can just bring your own services. And most importantly, it prioritizes portability from dev to production. As mentioned earlier, that's something that, if without that, it's not a super useful tool. It's just a toy. And we've really brought this from toy to tool that you can rely on. And now for Spring Devs, we have Spring Cloud Services. I'm like excited that I get to make this announcement because this happened last week. Version 0.18.0 shipped with Spring Cloud Services, and that's now one thing that you can play around with. I don't really recommend using a Mac Air. Actually, I would recommend something with a little more space, but you conceivably could. All right, the things that we've covered so far are largely enterprise devs. It has to do with making lives easier for people who are using CF, in all likelihood in production, and struggle with not just having a production-like environment they can work with, but having access to that in human terms. PCF, you can SSH in. PCF, you can have development environments, and we encourage it. But we also had to recognize in creating this product that not all of you work at companies where things are necessarily that easy. You may have to ask permission to have access to a development environment. SSH may be disabled because it's considered unsafe, so those excellent features aren't. I see somebody rolling their eyes, and yes, exactly, that sentiment. So we wanted to make sure people could take care of it on their own, take advantage of it, without having to necessarily ask permission. That's the enterprise dev story. PCF evaluators is the other one. If you are wanting to try CF, if you're sitting here and you don't use CF already, this is a way easier way to try that out than trying to set up a Cloud Foundry. It's also going to be more applicable maybe than using PWS, which will be a slightly different user experience than you'd have with actual Cloud Foundry. The second one has to do with trying upgrades. That's my favorite one. This is, again, subtly promoting ways that Pivotal wants you to work. We want you to be focused on upgrades. We want you to be focused on security patches. We want you to be able to roll out the greatest without worrying about everything that might happen when you do so. Having the ability to easily try 1.8 when it ships without having to switch any larger environments over it is a big benefit. And then there's also internal stakeholders. We oftentimes find that people are sold on this. People come to conferences like this, and they're like, this actually sounds like a great idea. But you still do need to sell other people in your organization. It's infinitely easier to do that with just something on your laptop where you can show how simple CF push really is. Which brings us to challenges. When talking with people externally, I think it comes across that the big win of this project was being able to make Cloud Foundry so small, or being able to make it work offline. But those weren't actually the big technical challenges, nor were they the things that we were most proud of. What we really were relying on was automation. So now I need a half-hearted show of hands. How many people are familiar with Concourse? Yay, okay. For those who aren't, this is a Concourse pipeline. It is probably the only piece of software I feel genuine affection toward, like real affection. It's changed the way that I see CI, it's changed what I expect out of it, and it changes how I expect to be able to work. Because this pipeline means that the PCF Dev team can have 2 pairs on it. That's 4 people. And they're able to keep up to date with all of the components shipping all the time. And that's because of the automation. That's the real development here. The first line there are CLI tests. The second are building CLI and building images. Those take a few hours. And then the really long line. The really long line are all tests that are written by other teams. So you have like acceptance tests for Redis and acceptance tests for CF in general. And that's how we built our product. The majority of tests that we test drove with, the vast majority, we didn't write. We just did a like trust free fall into this idea that if we made all of the acceptance tests pass, then it would be fundamentally the same. And that's how we built the product, just test by test, making it pass. And it passes all of the same tests that these teams keep. And that also takes a really long time and would be awful to do manually. After that, there's some other packaging and there's some publishing, but this pipeline has changed the way that we work. There's another pipeline I didn't take a picture of. It's our compilation pipeline. It's all of the different components in CF that automatically are compiled when they're released. So we don't need to do that. We come in, and if somebody released something new on GitHub, we've already compiled it, and if it's failed, at least we already know that, no matter how long it takes to really build those things. This has ended up being kind of a big plug for Concourse, but honestly, Concourse and PCF Dev, both wonderful tools, and PCF Dev couldn't exist without Concourse. We wouldn't have been able to solve the other problems if we didn't have the developer time to do so, and we certainly wouldn't have been able to do it with 4 people. Currently 3 people and an intern. They're really trucking. Overall, we want to change the way the world builds software. I think that's the thing that Pivotal focuses on a lot, and I'm proud of what we've built here in promoting that. I want to show you what we're able to do with PCF Dev. Looks like I did time. Okay, so this took like 7 seconds over 7 minutes to deploy. That's reasonable, I didn't lie. And the next thing we want to do is, let's see, we want to push, I can't believe I'm doing anything live, by the way. Never do this. Do as I say, not as I do. Oh, we have a firewall. This is exactly why you don't want to do this. I don't recommend going ahead with this. I don't want to struggle in front of you for ages. But what I was going to show you was that you could definitely push an app from Docker, scale it easily, immediately view it on your computer, and generally be able to do these offline if you didn't have a fancy firewall set up because there are hacker conferences happening down the street. This has, as I mentioned, now been a very short talk because there is no demo. But I'd be excited to take any of your questions now about what you can do with PCF Dev or Concourse, honestly. I'm enthusiastic. Having a hard time hearing you, I'm sorry. I could walk down there. You're asking about Spring Boot?
Yeah, so Spring Boot tools.
Mm-hmm. And Spring Cloud Services.
Yeah, just Spring Boot tools and Spring Boot suite.
Okay.
When you put them together, you can debug locally or remotely. So do you still need something like PCF Dev?
Oh, so I would say that if you already have a solution for that, then you wouldn't. That's only one of the reasons you use it. I think one of the most, sorry, I should repeat your question. He wants to know if you have a tool set that already allows you to debug Spring Boot and other apps like it, do you need PCF Dev? I'd say absolutely, because that's not the only reason that you use this. Debugging is just a really good option if there's something else restricting you from debugging. I like PCF Dev because it's easy to bring up to do acceptance. I know that one of our directors likes it because he can do acceptance on the long train ride back to Jersey, and we live in New York. I would say that it's beneficial for that, but absolutely useful without it, basically. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Where we can download it? Woohoo, I'm glad you asked, because it reminded me to look at my last slide. That didn't upload the actual thing, so I'm going to have to tell you. You can just get it at network.pivotal.io. PCF Dev is one of the top products on it. All you have to do is sign in, and you'll be able to get it. It's that basic. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the process then. He asked if you need to download a CLI. What you do is you download a zip if you're on Mac. You open it and you just run a script. The script will install the plugin to the CLI. You would need the CF CLI first to install the plugin, but it'll remind you of that if you don't have it. After you install the plugin, it's as basic as just CF Dev start. To warn you, the first time will take a while depending on your internet connection. The hotel internet connection was tragically slow, so that was a little rough earlier today. But if you're on a decent connection, it shouldn't take that long to download the appliance. Did you have any other questions about that? Awesome. Cool. Oh, that's a good question. How easy can you switch to different versions? Right now, PCF Dev doesn't support change. We don't want you to keep work on it that you would want to persist. But switching to different versions is very easy. You update the plugin, and the plugin will grab the right version. We also allow you to do that if you need to downgrade for any reason. So you just grab the version of the plugin that corresponds to the version of PCF you want to use, and do that long download again. Any other questions? Okay, so minimum 6. We recommend 8. That's available. So you should be safe with 16 gigabytes of RAM, provided you don't have a million things up. We see the most problems with people leaving a ton of Chrome tabs open and not knowing how much of your RAM that takes. But yeah, 16 is recommended for your device. Oh, for your laptop. Oh, yeah, sorry. I always make that. 16 for your laptop. And the VM should max, with Spring Cloud Services, require 8 free. It won't take it all, but it doesn't want to start unless you have that much free. It'll allow you to down to 6. Below that, we don't allow you to, because who wants you to have that degraded of an experience? It just won't start.
So, parody question of
Yeah.
PCF Dev versus CF proper, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm a developer, and I don't know a whole ton about DevOps.
Mhm.
How do I show this to both management and DevOps and get that buy-in of, how different is it, I guess, between the two?
The experience
Yeah.
should be no different.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only adding the dev. So you have CF Dev start versus CF start. But if you're talking to management or just making this argument, the user experience should be the same. We've achieved some things differently, but your end experience should be very similar.
And DevOps probably has all that base infrastructure, it's the VM scaling and all that that's already there, so it's,
Yeah.
for them, it's probably not a huge difference of moving from something different, or?
Moving from something different to
Well,
Pivotal Cloud Foundry?
Yeah, CF, I guess it's a bigger question.
Oh, that's a way bigger question.
Talk upstairs, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a question for drinks with every pivot here. Yeah, no, that can be a big switch, but
I'm just trying to think of if we're talking this conversation,
yeah,
I'm managing expectations, not make them all disappointed, and hey, we
Yeah.
love this thing on our laptops,
but I think that people in DevOps would understand that switching your entire infrastructure is not as simple as just downloading this thing on their laptop. So you shouldn't be dismaying them. That's the important thing. Yeah. They shouldn't be fooled. This has a lot more to do with just showing the developer experience that you can CF push, scale, go on with your lives. Yes, It is, and in fact, the PCF Dev team does that. I think we're going to be supporting AWS images in the hopefully near future to make that even easier if you're running your CI on AWS. And that's been like a really phenomenal use for it, honestly. Oh, I apologize. The question was, can you use PCF Dev on your CI, like in your pipeline? And that's another great use for it. Actually, the third use case, which is probably less important to people in this convention, but our huge third use case is people who build CF. It's phenomenally useful in our pipelines. It's phenomenally useful for people testing like build packs and different deployments, so they can just do that simply. It'll become easier once we have available just AWS images, but I think that's been scaled back for a moment to make it more secure.
If I follow-up question, so you have Pivotal Web Services out in the open internet, which works, which is very nice. So are there plans to port PCF Dev onto the cloud so that if you want enterprise customers who are looking to go PCF, they could just execute everything on the cloud itself so that they don't have to deploy anything on the desktops anymore?
The AWS images I just mentioned actually would achieve that. That's part of the idea, that some people would want to have it locally without an internet connection, and some people really want the ability to just say AWS and have it go directly from our image to their account. So that's another good way to use the cloud for that instead of on your desktop. It's not a required perk.
Is there a procedure to take PCF Dev and run it on a local ESX, VMware ESX box? Because
No.
by default, it's on VirtualBox.
No, not currently. We have a lot of our code is open source in the PCF Dev repo. And I would suggest that these might not be changes that would be too challenging to make yourself, but currently we only support VirtualBox. I know there are plans to support more in the future.
Yeah, it used to support ESX when it was called Micro Cloud Foundry.
It did. Oh, Micro Cloud Foundry or Micro PCF?
It used to be called Micro Cloud Foundry back in the day.
That's another thing I might need to clarify. We have a lot of different names that things have gone through. Micro Cloud Foundry was a very different project that was a lot more bulky. Micro PCF was a prior iteration of the same project that was named something different.
Yeah.
And we also supported VMware, but nothing else.
Right.
We are hoping to do it in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoy your happy hour. Check out the product and talk to me if you have any more questions.